As Long as We Remember by Kae. Set in the world of the action-adventure video game Starbound, published by Chucklefish, As Long as We Remember follows the fortunes of Protector Nyota Saimiri. Nyota is ready to put her past behind her and start a new life, helping Earth's Terran Protectorate spread peace across the galaxy. But her hopes, dreams and entire world shatter before her eyes when an ancient horror smashes through Protectorate and planet alike. Left adrift in distant space, Nyota can only search for answers. Did anyone else survive? Can that thing be stopped? Her search leads her to an ancient gateway and a dangerous plan. If she can open that gateway, she can reach the horror sealed beyond it and destroy it. But she is not the only one trying to find a way in. The Occasus have allied themselves with the evil that destroyed their homeworld and plan to use its power to cleanse the galaxy of all who oppose them. The seal is already cracking, and Nyota must find the keys before the horror unleashes itself upon them. She has little time. The Occasus are well equipped and on the same quest, and the 6 keys are scattered far and wide across the heavens. Nyota forms new alliances to chase the long-forgotten past through cavern and temple, sea and sky.
Yes, books of the game. That's an interesting topic. It's interesting to me because it's not something that I've actually been interested in for that long, really, considering the number of books I've read, particularly in sci-fi and fantasy genres, and of course all the games I've played over the years. I've only relatively recently made the connection. It was, what would it be? Well, Drew Wagar and Kate Russell really introduced me to books of the games with Elite Premonition and Mostly Harmless, which I loved. 2 very different books. I'd heard of Elite Dangerous, never played it, so I didn't really know anything about the world, but it didn't matter. I didn't need to, because they were good books. It just hadn't occurred to me that, you know, you might enjoy playing a game, you might enjoy reading a book, and it was a crossover thing. I just never occurred to me it was a thing to do. And now, of course, I look back at some of the things I've read and enjoyed, and I actually think, well, actually, if they made a game about that, I'd be really keen to play that. However, they haven't. And of course, from that, I went on to things like the excellent Tales from the Frontier, because, of course, there's 15 essentially short stories, but some of them are quite long. They're really novella length. And then you get all these different angles on what is essentially the Elite universe. And it does really seem like, you know, the stars the limit. For the Elite ones, I've read some others. There was John Harper's, was a really good space romp, and Hear the Wheel. Now, the Tales from the Frontier, it's a long time since I've read that book, but I can remember, I don't know if I could recite all the stories, but I can remember a lot of them, at least by name. You know, the ones that really stuck in my mind. Crossing the Line is always the one that comes to me first, and there's one called The Easy Way Out that was a real, well, I don't want to give spoilers, but great. What else was there? One called Blood is Thicker, that was excellent. The Comet's Trail, The Comet's Trail. Beyond Civilization. Those are probably my absolute favourite little clutch there. There was a beautiful little gem called Ode to Betty Cole, and another with a really unique, wonderful take on things, Pinacoteca. I mean, they're all good. I enjoyed all the stories, but that was wonderful. I even met some of the authors once, because I do remember going to a convention fairly soon after I'd read the book and seeing somebody's name badge, and I'm saying, oh, are you, I feel it might have been Darren Gray, but don't quote me on that, as they say. And I saying, oh, you're an author, Tales from the Frontier, I've just read that. No, no, don't tell me your story, I'll tell you what you wrote. And so I guessed whatever I guessed. No. And I don't know that I quite went through all damn 15 before I got there, but I just couldn't, and I've never somehow or other been really able to actually match authors to stories. What I should have done was got the book out, and then I could have actually had a look and pretended that I remembered every one of them and who had written which, but I didn't. It was a great book. Now, what else was there? Then, of course, Drew Wagar went on to write the Lords of Midnight books, the Lords of Midnight and Doomdark's Revenge, and it surprised me actually how much I did enjoy those, because I could feel the game behind the story of that book in the Lords of Midnight, and I enjoyed it, and it was very it was dramatic and a real page turner. Then Doomdark's Revenge came along, and I remember thinking before I read it, oh, is this going to be a bit more of the same? Because kind of that's how games go, and this was a pretty thick book, but it wasn't. It was very different. I have no idea how the game goes in this respect, because I've never played Lords of Midnight, but the book was brilliant. It took things on a different line altogether. It developed different characters. A real page turner, and yeah, that was I really loved that. And now, of course, you've found a brand new one, brand new game, brand new author, brand new book, As Long As We Remember by Kae. I'm so glad you took that one on. It was mean of you to ask me to be the second copy editor on it, because it's always a difficult job. It's a difficult job anyway, is copy editing. But this book also, it's a dramatic adventure tale. It is also a page turner, and that makes it a really difficult book to copy edit, because obviously when you're copy editing, you're looking for, you know, is the punctuation in the right place? Is there extra words slipped in? Is the wrong word being put somewhere? Is you know, is the chronology right? When somebody says something happened 2 days ago, is it genuinely 2 days ago in the story, or is it just that it's happened 2 chapters ago, but really it was just an hour ago? You know, all these sorts of things crop up, and I know as a writer how easy it is to lose track of things like that when you're writing a book. And I did what I have had to do with quite a few books when I'm going to copy edit. I get to the point where I know I'm getting lost in the story. And you get lost in the story, you will lose the errors. So I just had to give in, take the book, manuscript as it was at the time, sit in a corner with it and just read it and just enjoy the story. And then I could go back, put the copy edit hat on and actually read it as a copy editor from the start again, knowing what happened. So I didn't have that great urge to skip over things so I could turn the page, because I can be a very fast reader, but that's not what you want for a copy editor. You want somebody being meticulous, which I try to do. So I hope nobody's going to pop up and say they found loads and loads of copy edit errors in there. But as I say, I was the second copy editor, so I hope that's not happened. But yeah, it was a great book. I was very surprised to learn that it was a debut novel, because, and I don't actually know too much about Kae's background, but I think clearly she's a writer. She's written other stuff. I mean, clearly not a novel before. But she knows what she's doing. She knows how to put prose together, how to build a drama, how to create a character, how to create a world. And obviously she's used the world of Starbound, which is another game I've never played. But within that, of course, you can't just lay it out like a how to play the game book. With any of these books, you have to develop the characters into real beings. I was going to say real people. There are a few people in there, but mainly they're not, as in not human people. But yeah, she gets some lovely sympathetic characters. She gets real creepy characters in there. There's some scary stuff. The way that things are put together, the way it's all going on. There's some very touching, moving moments in it. Yeah, definitely recommend that one. And certainly if you're into books of the game, it should be one for your collection. And I'm hoping that I am going to get to see Starbound played on Drew Wagar's retro stream, which I believe he does most Saturdays. So I've bookmarked that too. I'm not quite sure when that's going to happen, but I hope it is going to happen. And I'm now more interested in the game Starbound in the same way that I got more interested in Elite and in the Lords of Midnight. From having read the books, I've started to get a real sense of how people get so engrossed in them. I've done it myself. I've been completely engrossed in games. Some very early incarnations of Dungeons and Dragons, for example, but that was in the days where they really weren't so easy to play because they weren't computerised then. But these are great. And As Long as We Remember by Kae is definitely one for the list. If you like books of the game, if you like adventure stories, if you like fantasy, if you like sci-fi, it's great. I'm really glad that you've taken it on. As Long as We Remember by Kae. An extract from chapter 1. Wake up, you have overslept. Nyota rolled over and mumbled something incoherent. Her bed was warm and soft, and she was still so tired. Staying up all last night to make sure she knew the proper graduation protocol had not been her best decision, even if she had been too anxious to sleep. No good anyway, she mumbled into her pillow. Then the meaning of the words hit her and she shot upright, cracking her head on the bunk above. When the stars faded, she muttered something rude about the beds not being made for apex height and rolled out of her bunk. At just past 2 meters tall, she towered over most of her human classmates, and her mane of dark grey hair was in need of a good brushing if the window reflection was any indication. Fur too, probably. Your hairbrush is in the bathroom where you last left it, said the mechanical voice helpfully. Her sale, the generally useful AI issued to every protector and trainee, was never good at realising when its information was redundant. Nyota made a mental note, for the umpteenth time this month, to update its programming when she got the chance. She shuffled over to the bathroom door and sighed. She'd gone to sleep in her day clothes again. At least she'd remembered to remove her leg brace. A numbed ankle would do poorly during the graduation ceremony. She stopped by a low table beside the door to retrieve her spare, rolling up her pant leg to pull it on and fasten it around her left thigh and shin. The buttons gave her trouble, her fingers still clumsy with sleep. Her roommates had asked why she didn't find a brace that was easier to put on in the morning, but Velcro or zippers weren't an option for someone with dense fur. The old scars hadn't given her trouble in weeks, but it never hurt to prepare. You can generally open doors by interacting with them, if you are awake enough for that, Sale quipped, badly misreading her pause. I know that much, Bite Brains. She tapped the door. It slid open with a gentle hum. She made to grab the dark hairbrush-shaped thing on the edge of the sink, but stopped when she realised it was Isobu's electric wire tool mash-up. For styling coronas, he claimed, and carefully unplugged the contraption. He was terrible about remembering to put things away. Her wrist brushed a piece of crumpled paper, a note. There was a single luminous feather resting on it, plucked from one of his vestigial wings. Isobu was fond of leaving them as gifts. Its faint glow told her it had been left hours ago. It dissolved into a cloud of warm air as she picked up the note. Nyota, she read. You're still asleep as I'm writing this, but knowing you'll be up with plenty of time to spare for the ceremony, feeling antsy. I'm off to watch the sunrise at the tree. Sorry I didn't wake you. Figured you deserved a bit of rest for once. We can watch it set tonight. I'll get you some jam to make up for it. The old place near Marcy's picked up a new flavour. Isobu. She smiled, folded the note and put it in her pocket. A few passes with the brush and a half-hearted rub to her cheek fur made her look marginally more presentable. Most mornings she would have stopped to admire the hanging banners in the common area, or glance out the window at Earth's blue skies and sprawling cityscape. Not today. She was already running late, according to Sale. Sale wasn't the best at reading emotion in Apex, but it was never wrong about time. She couldn't manage better grooming, but she could wear her uniform instead of her sleep-rumpled clothes. Your uniform is available to collect from your personal locker, Sale told her, reading her wishes correctly for once. It spoiled the mood by adding, "It is quite impressive that you can remain so serene when you are running so late. Well done, you." "Hush, Sale." Nyota tapped her code into the locker's keypad and opened the door. It creaked. She'd never gotten round to oiling the hinges. "I have 20 minutes. I'm doing fine." She buried her face in the shirt and inhaled deeply. It smelled wonderful, like lavender, that little earth flower she'd come to love. When she shook it out, a tiny sachet tumbled free, tied with a yellow ribbon that had a feather stuck through the bow. Nyota smiled. That explained it then. One of the avians in the tailoring studio often shared lunch breaks with her. He had remembered her, even on this busiest of days. The uniform fit perfectly. Blue had never been her colour, but it went well here somehow, with the bold golden symbol of the Protectorate at the centre of her shirt to catch the eye. With one last look at the mirror and a self-conscious rub at her fur, which refused to lie flat, Nyota stepped out into the main hall. A few people milled about, watching the overhead television or relaxing in the deep, comfortable chairs by the window. She spotted Marcy near the edge of the crowd, right as Marcy saw her. "Hey, Nyota, have a moment to chat?" "Not really," Nyota replied, hurrying over, "but I can make one, I think." Part of her brain pointed out how silly it was to think of making time, but she squashed the thought. She'd lived with humans long enough that she needed to start thinking like one, at least a little bit. Marcy had been her friend almost as long as she'd been on Earth. That was worth at least a small delay. "The ceremony. It's going to start soon, isn't it?" Marcy looked up at the wall clock. "Guess you really don't have a moment. Hurry up or you'll be late. Don't worry though, if you get assigned to some distant world, don't forget you'll always have friends here on Earth." She elbowed Nyota. "Seriously, keep in touch. I'll bother you forever if you don't." Nyota grinned. "Thanks, Marcy." "Be sure and call me whenever you can," Marcy added. "I want to hear everything about what it's like up there." "Of course," Nyota promised. "And you'll keep me updated on your research, all right? I want to hear exactly how you humans managed your first moon landing, pre-FTL, and mad enough to strap rockets to your backs. It must be quite the story." That earned a laugh. "Don't worry, I'll bury you in details as soon as I get the chance. Now get moving." Glancing at the clock again, Nyota nodded and hurried down the pristine white and yellow hall. No time today for coffee or a nice oculemonade to wake her up. "Good morning, Mr. Leadnut," she called to the glitch janitor as she hurried past. He was almost always out on this bridge when it wasn't raining. The janitor tipped his hat to her briefly, then went back to sweeping. Thick pink blossoms whispered against her boots as she skirted the pile of swept-up flowers he was making. "Why rush? Come sit and enjoy the serene breeze," a hilotl called to her as she passed the great tree, her favourite part of the campus. The morning sun made his thin green skin look almost as damp as the dewy grass. "Sorry, another time." Nyota bowed her head in greeting. "I'm running behind." "Ah yes, graduation. Such a thing only comes once." The hilotl nodded sagely. A few falling petals stuck to his fins. "At least take a memento then." A memento. Nyota looked up at the tree and the wind chimes singing from its branches, then down at its scattered petals tumbling across the ground. Something darker purple caught her eye, a large, beautiful, four-petalled flower. She smiled. Sentimentality wasn't common back home, but a few years on Earth had taught Nyota appreciation, and she had always loved flowers. They reminded her of the few her mother used to tend so long ago. "It can't hurt," she murmured, plucking it and tucking it into her hair. Then she shook the distraction out of herself and hurried off again. "You're cutting it close, Nyota." A silver-furred apex called out as she approached the doors. "My apologies, Nico." She paused to catch her breath and tuck a few flyaways behind her ear. Slept through sale and Marcy wanted to talk. Nico smiled encouragingly. "Well, it hasn't started yet, no harm done. Please hurry inside before the ceremony starts. Oh, and Nyota, congratulations, you made it." A matching smile appeared on Nyota's face. It meant something deeper coming from him. "Thank you, Nico." Most of her classmates were already milling about backstage. Turnmail, a rather vain rose-coloured glitch, was using one of the display cases to check his reflection. Hakimi was chatting quietly with Ronald, probably giving him an earful about not having his moustache neatly groomed. The halotl herself was immaculate as always, a few notes carefully inked on the underside of her wrist. Ronald just sighed and let her talk at him. They went through this every week. Marcy had once said that they were like an old married couple. Multhony, who had the dubious honour of being the only Flora Nyota had ever seen in a protectorate uniform, looked uncomfortable and sidled over to her. "How's it going, Multhony?" she asked. "Floran regrets drinking 5 oculemonades for breakfast." The reply came with a hiss and much fidgeting. "You know better than that, Muth," Nyota whispered back with a sigh. "Remember last time?" Multhony nodded, sharp teeth showing in a guilty grimace. What a night that had been. Nyota looked around. Now that the stage lights had dimmed, there was a distinct absence in the room. "Have you seen Asobu?" she said. It wasn't like him to miss something this important. The Floran shrugged. Floran was too busy hoping for bathrooms. "Curious. This is unusual. He is always prompt for any of the Grand Protector Portia's speeches, and this one is most important," Turnmail said, walking over. "Uncertain. He was already here when we got here." Hakimi stopped lecturing Ronald and joined the trio. "I believe he went downstairs a few minutes before you arrived," she said. "He mentioned something about seeing a strange woman down there. Do you know anything about this, Ronald?" Ronald mumbled something about getting his ears lectured off by a fish. Hakimi rolled her eyes. "No, nothing helpful," she translated. Before Nyota could ask anything else, Nico locked the door and shushed them. The ceremony was about to begin. As the curtain rose and the crowd applauded, Nyota tapped the command button on her portable sail transmitter, turning on the earpiece. If her sail started blaring to the whole backstage, she would get in a ton of trouble. "Command prompt received. How can I help you?" Sail said. "Sail, can you scan the building?" Nyota kept her voice as low as possible. "Beginning scan. What am I looking for?" Nyota frowned. Isobu had told her his plasma composition once, and searching specifically for that would probably have been the most efficient method, but her notebook was back in her room. From what she could remember, "His brand contains a unique sodium alloy," she told the AI. "Look for a Novakid life signature with locally focused magnetism and a relatively high concentration of sodium nearby. It should be in the same building as me." "Understood. Narrowing focus. You should probably pay attention to the speeches," Sale remarked. "The Grand Protector will be starting hers soon." Nyota sighed and looked up at the stage. She'd done all she could. "Why do I have this awful feeling? Isobu, please be safe." As Long as We Remember by Kae. A book review by Stuart Aiken. This fast-moving action novel is based on a game, so the first thing I should let you know is I've never played such a game. The conventions, scenarios, options and all other aspects of gaming are utterly unknown to me. I worried initially that this might make the book unreadable for me, or at the very least less entertaining than it might be for a gamer. I'm happy to report my fears were unfounded. This seems at first to be pure adventure, often with the protagonist facing what seem insuperable odds. However, as the story unfolds, revealing its many layers, it becomes clear that this is a work with real depth. The many characters, most formed in the fertile imagination of the author, and many utterly alien to the average reader, are invested with personality, quirks, fears, character, history, family and emotions. In spite of the more or less relentless action, which I understand is a vital part of any game, there are passages of real and deep emotional experience. The reader feels with the players. This story is essentially the quest to replace evil with good, so frequently used as the drive for a fantasy novel. Here, however, we also have content more often found in the science fiction novel, but genre isn't important here. The book is eminently readable regardless of the background to the story. The reader easily empathises with many of the characters and quickly learns to loathe the evildoers, the monsters, the destroyers. That the main protagonist is a physically, mentally, morally and spiritually strong female with a questionable past that haunts her throughout the tale makes the whole experience more accessible as well as utterly gripping. We live through many threats, adventures, uncertainties, triumphs and disasters with her. The story, action-packed as it is, manages to explore morality, betrayal, courage, grief, friendship, loyalty, and the strange hold belief can impose on some individuals. And the denouement is superbly handled to leave the reader satisfied. As Long as We Remember by Kae is a space adventure set in the world of the video game Starbound. It starts on a nicely upbeat note with a group of students close to graduating. Now, of course, I knew as a reader that the path for this particular group was not going to be smooth. But I have to say that the scale of the catastrophe was way beyond anything I'd expected. So with this one, prepare yourself for an explosive start. Speaking of starting, I've started on an overview, and I'm now going to do a 360 and home in on a particular detail. Something that always intrigues me about any work of science fiction is the technology. What is it? How does it work? Is it credible within the laws of physics? Is it credible within the world of the book? Who thought it up? Now, in the case of As Long as We Remember, there's an added complication for Kae as the author. The world in which she's writing, although it's obviously fictional, is not her fiction. It's someone else's creation. And there are pros and cons to having a ready-built world. There must be real tension between having oven-ready artefacts ready to go and then not having the freedom to have exactly the context and devices that you might want. Fascinating topic, as evidenced by me taking off down a bit of a rabbit hole with it, because this is actually not the angle I asked Kae about. But if that is an angle that you'd like to explore further, I say check out author Drew Wagar. He's a veteran of multiple game-based books, plus books set in worlds he's created himself, so he's seen that question from all angles. But no, I suppose in a way I looked at this angle. Starbound tech versus Kae's tech. And this was my question to Kae. Have you followed Starbound's technology in all the areas where various different technologies pop up? Or is there an area that's your own invention? And this is Kae's reply. I'm honestly terrible with even modern technology, Maybe that's why my normal wheelhouse is high fantasy. It's a point of humour with my friends too. But to answer properly, I followed along with Starbound as closely as I could. The only things I invented as far as tech goes were little details about why things work. For example, the pistol using energy instead of bullets, because it isn't explained in-game and might be weird to a reader. And the bit about the escape option in the library arc. That one is a relic of my actual gameplay. This whole thing started years ago as a written Let's Play, and in the very first draft I needed to explain why enemies vanished in a burst of light on my screen captures. I gave them the typical survival mode player respawn options, since I was playing in survival mode too and it made sense at the time. But Nyota doesn't get the respawn option because that would just take away all the tension. So I had to invent why she couldn't do that too. I also added Nyota's hologram ship controls because they looked cool in my head. Fun reason for anything. But usually I stuck to tampering with social and cultural details instead of tech. Good answer. And in fact it is the social and cultural details that make this such a readable story. Oh, and I do love that fun reason for anything. In my book, that's a good vibe for an author of fast-moving space adventures. And I just want to end by giving a shout out to Chucklefish, the developers of the video game Starbound. They not only gave Kae permission to use their world to write the novel that she'd been planning for so many years, but they also gave Fantastic Books Publishing the permission to publish it.